Senators, when the Senate last rose, we were discussing motion number 2, resolution of Parliament to borrow for the COVID response. Senator Francis.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I seek your leave to join fellow senators in extending my sincere condolences to the families and friends of the 42 victims of COVID-19 and other citizens who have transitioned to the great beyond in recent times. I also extend best wishes for speedy recovery to the citizens who are in active cases category, especially those in critical care. Madam President, permit me also to extend my heartfelt compliments to the Independence Committee under your leadership for the great work which went into staging what was undeniably a fantastic, superior quality and enjoyable independence celebration. Well done, Madam President. You should take a bow. My congratulations also go to Senator Mary Isaac as a recipient of the National Award for Long Service in the Public Service. Congratulations, Madam. Madam, while I'm on that topic, the Prime Minister announced the names of the recipients of this year's National Awards. These persons will be honored on the 7th of March 2020 at a virtual investiture ceremony to be held at 2 o'clock. These citizens will be celebrated for excellence in their various fields and for acts of bravery or for meritorious service in accordance with the criteria established under the Order of Saint Lucia. Madam President, I would also like to ask senators in this regard to join me in extending profound congratulations to all awardees under the National Awards and to thank all the citizens who took time out of their busy schedules to make sure that they submitted top quality nominations to the committee. This year we received a resounding number of very good quality nominations, but of course we are constrained by quotas, and therefore we could not really select all of those who were worthy of winning this year. So we are employing persons who wish to nominate down the road to resubmit some of those nominations that did not win this year. I really sincerely hope that that plea does not fall on deaf ears and that we receive some of those nominations down the road. Madam President, thank you very much for your indulgence. I now move my attention to the matter at hand, which is the motion for, or seeking approval rather, for a loan of $40 million equivalent 81 million EC for COVID response recovery and resilience development policy program. Madam President, the terms of the loan are deemed very, very generous, and we must be grateful for the benevolence and generosity of the multilateral organizations who are coming to our rescue to ensure that we are able to manage the socio-economic impact of COVID in our country. When we speak of terms, Madam President, we're talking about a 40-year loan with a grace period of 10 years on both principal and interest. I say both principal and interest because no mention was made in the resolution to suggest that interest will be charged during the grace period and that interest would be required to be paid. Madam President, it doesn't get better than this. The applicable interest rates and service charge are also extremely generous. 1% commencing after 1% interest, commencing after the 10-year moratorium, effective 15th May 2041, and 2% from year 41. And of course, a service charge of 0.75%. The leader of government business shared with this House earlier today the fiscal predicament of the state. Indeed, Madam President, the Prime Minister has spared no time in his ongoing articulation of the same. So I believe as a country we have a pretty good idea as to what we are dealing with, and whatever we don't hear, I believe there's a sense where we are feeling and we are seeing for ourselves. So the situations are dire. The consequences of COVID-19 on small states like ours have been highlighted in many publications. The internet is replete with articles and reference and publications, and I want to focus on one such publication by the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs in May 2020, which is entitled "The COVID-19 Pandemic Puts Small Island Developing Economies in Dire Straits." So if you permit me, Madam President, I'll just read briefly just a section of this, which would put the country's predicament into proper perspective.
Leave is granted.
Thank you, Madam President. In that article, it is mentioned that COVID-19 is posing significant health and economic risk to small island developing economies, given the small economic base, high degree of openness, and extreme dependence on economic performance of a few developed countries. The article goes on to say, Madam President, amid sharp falls in tourism revenues and remittances, small island economies are likely to experience the most pronounced contraction, further exacerbating their vulnerability to economic and climate shocks. Disproportionately high debt servicing burdens of many small island economies will weaken the external balance, potentially increasing the likelihood of debt faults. Many small island economies highly dependent on food imports face the added challenge of ensuring food security during the health and economic crisis. Finally, Madam President, the pandemic response will constrain the fiscal space of small island developing economies and exacerbate their vulnerabilities to natural disasters brought about by climate change. Madam President, this is consistent with our country's current economic reality. The economic fundamentals of Saint Lucia have taken a razor-sharp dive, a razor-sharp nosedive, and the consequential impact socially is also dire. Every business sector has been impacted, thus the livelihood of many of our citizens have been similarly impacted. Many of them are on the breadline, and we've discussed this here today, we've discussed in other sittings, Madam President, and we said a lot of them are in despair, and that is the reality, they are in despair. In the absence of economic and social safety nets, it is accepted that the government, out of grave necessity, must find ways to address the social and economic needs of the country. It is a necessity, the government has no choice. Indeed, that is the government's mandate, to ensure that it addresses the socio-economic landscape of the country. Madam President, having said this, the only way is for borrowing, because we do not have the safety nets. We do not have funds set aside to assist. We do not have monies in the sinking fund. We do not have any significant programs to provide that level of safety net that is so desperately required. So the borrowing is inevitable. It is inevitable. So I have no fundamental issue with the resolution before us, Madam President. Since the pandemic commenced in March last year, approaches have been made to this Honorable House for approval to borrow for COVID-19 relief. as well as for other purposes. Madam President, if my arithmetic serves me right, we've borrowed nearly $500 million for COVID relief. And we've borrowed from the World Bank, IMF, CDB, IDB, EIB, ROCT, and of course, not to mention the local banking sector. It would be useful, Madam President, if we had received a statement, outlining the application of some of those funds, because, $500 million is significant. We do know that, budgetary support would have been one of the areas government would have required funding for. We do know government, through, of course, reports from the Prime Minister, that a significant amount of funds have gone into strengthening our health sector, and of course our leader of government business did mention that this morning. But I believe a statement, itemizing or providing information on how those funds were applied, I believe would have been quite useful for us, or for me for that matter. Madam President, the leader of government business told us that the proposed loan funds will be used for budgetary support, further budgetary support, legislative strengthening, infrastructure, and small business initiatives. And I thank her for sharing that information. However, Madam President, I would like to suggest that some of the funds be allocated as follows. Madam President, we are aware that NIC had provided much needed income support for a lot of the workers who were displaced due to COVID-19. Regrettably, that source dried out, and I do know that a lot of persons are still out there unemployed and struggling, as we said earlier on. And it would be useful if we could use some of those funds to provide some support for those people, especially, single mothers with children whom they have to support, with meals, with school supplies, with, just basic living support. The business sector, Madam President, especially the SMEs, are also in dire straits, with most businesses closed, with no means to meet their commitments, their rent, their salaries, their utility bills, their loans. And in case of the SMEs, many persons simply cannot afford their domestic bills, because the business is the individual and the individual is the business, because in most cases there are individual proprietors who actually meet the daily living expenses from the business itself. So when the business is struggling, they too are struggling on the domestic side. So I believe some support needs to be given there. The leader of government business did tell us that some of these funds would go towards supporting the SME, but there was no specificity in terms of what areas and how, we are going to what form of assistance will be provided to this critical sector. Speaking of the sector, Madam President, in most cases we do know, through no fault of those SMEs, the businesses just cannot generate enough revenue to meet their needs, and of course to enable them to save for wet days. A lot of those small business people have absolutely no savings through no fault of theirs, which is sad. Many salaried workers are in the same predicament. Their income is not sufficient to enable them to save. So when they find themselves in a situation such as what we are dealing with, they just do not have the financial wherewithal to survive. And it is painful, Madam President. In some cases, I will hasten to say some of those individuals have not developed the discipline for savings, and it is hoped that the realities that we face and the challenges as it relates to COVID-19 will cause them to recalibrate and assess how they do their personal financial budgeting, and to set aside a little bit, as little as it is, to ensure that they are able to meet their basic needs in situations of crisis. Madam President, there's also the concern that some persons, even if they want to save, they just do not have the earning capacity to enable them to save. Madam President, I'm not sure if you are aware, but there are persons in this country who earn $500 a month. $500 a month, Madam President. Why? The issue of minimum wage has not been addressed for a very long time. I think in this honorable house we have raised it on some occasions, and it was hoped that by now we would have made some concerted effort to actually address that issue. We cannot continue to have our people working for $500, and in some cases less than that, $3 an hour, you know. So this huge issue must be given priority. It must be given priority, Madam President. So I say a Kwev chair, I say that all the time. Say a Kwev chair, people they work long hours and then they cannot make ends meet with what they earn. And we must fix this quickly. Naturally, if people are paid well, they are more likely to be able to meet their basic needs and have some savings for wet days. In essence, the marginal population will be fewer, thus decreasing the pressure on the state to provide for these citizens, particularly in cases such as what we are experiencing. So it will not just be beneficial to the workers themselves, it will be beneficial to the state in that persons will be more readily available and more able to meet their own needs, thereby relieving government of the pressure to provide for them. Madam President, in talking about SMEs, we must focus our attention on the fishermen. There are fishermen who are struggling. We have the transportation sector. And also we have the farmers. Some of the farmers are really struggling. You heard them crying for help. And I think they need to receive some level of support, and I believe some support can come out of the funds that we are requested to approve. We must invest in our farmers so that we can become more self-sufficient in terms of food security. We are being told that one of the fallouts of COVID-19 is that food security globally will become an issue. We don't want to find ourselves in a situation, Madam President, where we are faced with shortage of food in this country when we have arable lands that can solve this problem for us. But of course our farmers, a lot of them are willing to farm, but they do not have the financial wherewithal to buy inputs and what have you. So I think some of those funds can go towards helping them. Madam President, finally, the health sector. I believe there is need for additional investments in the health system. Critical medicine, supplies, equipment, human resource, we need to focus on that, Madam President. From my experience, there are some critical medical supplies that are in short supply at OKEU. We have a situation where we have equipment, some of the equipment don't work. We still have to get an ambulance to take a patient from the emergency to Tapia Hospital and pay to get a scan done, because the last time I interfaced with the hospital, the scanner wasn't working. That was an issue that we had before OKEU was commissioned, and I thought that was a thing of the past, but that issue is still there, and I believe we need to look at the equipment, make sure that we don't just have equipment, but we have equipment that is functioning, Madam President. Any one of us might find ourselves at OKEU where we will need, proper health care, and we will need the equipment to work. Sometimes 1 minute is all you need between life or death. So we need to ensure that some of these funds go towards providing some level of support there for the equipment, human resource. There's a shortage of doctors and nurses. I do know, Madam President, that we've had, the state has had to redeploy some of the resources to the respiratory hospital. Therefore, you have constraints within OKEU and our other primary healthcare providers. But we need to look at that critically and see where we can source additional human capital to be able to get the healthcare at the standard that is required. Yes, Madam President. So, what comes to mind, and we've said it before, is that, the physical plant is not healthcare. We can have a beautiful physical plant. Because I don't know if you've been there, madam, but OKU is a beautiful physical plant. It's beautiful. But if we do not have the medicines, we do not have the supplies that are necessary, we do not have the human capital, and we do not have the equipment, at the end of the day, it is not going to be useful for us. Of course, a well-functional hospital must have all these. Our citizens deserve proper health care. A healthy nation is a wealthy nation, and I think all our thrust should be towards making sure that we have a healthy nation. Madam, I have said all this to say that we must invest some of our monies in terms of improving the health care, and I hope that I've articulated it well enough. I take this opportunity to thank all the health professionals for their service to the nation under very difficult circumstances. We do know that they are working very, very hard. They are working extremely hard. And anytime you get an opportunity to interact with them, Madam President, they don't hesitate to tell you how tired they are, but they are pushing to ensure that they serve under trying circumstances. So we have to keep them in our thoughts and keep them in our prayers, because they are really, really trying. Madam President, testing. I would like to propose also that we increase our testing capacity from the perspective of conducting more testing and also in improving the turnaround time for delivery of test results. We have to invest more in vaccinations, Madam President. I know we have ordered vaccines and they should be in transit, and we have received support from friendly regional governments, but we need to move post-haste and try and invest some of those funds in getting vaccinations such that we can try to stabilize the situation in the country post-haste. In that regard, I want to state that some statistics came to hand today, troubling statistics, but regardless of how troubling it is, I know if we invest more in improving our health system, that we can turn around those statistics very quickly. Saint Lucia has been reported as having 55% of the total number of active cases in the OECS and 61% of deaths, while we have 28% of the population. So, Madam President, we did very, very well at the beginning of COVID, and I think we do have the capacity to fix the problems that we now have if we invest wisely and focus on ensuring that all the critical success factors that are required in making sure that we return the country to good health, that we do not overlook that critical requirement, Madam President. Madam President, I would like to thank you for your indulgence, and I look forward to receiving the additional information from the Leader of Government Business when she does her rebuttal. I thank you.
Senator Auger.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Sergeant at Arms. I think we'll have to transfer you to the respiratory hospital for your thoroughness. Madam President, good afternoon, fellow senators. We are discussing the resolution to borrow some $81 million from the International Development Agency, and I wish to offer a few comments. I would like to join my colleague senator in indicating the terms of the borrowing are very favorable. The charges, half of 1% on the unwithdrawn portion of the loan, excellent. Noteworthy also is the charge of 0.75% on the withdrawn amount, which is in effect the interest charge. These are good terms compared to commercial rates available, some of the commercial rates we've seen on other paper coming through. And this is the sort of numbers we should be looking for on transactions long term with favorable rates. Wherever possible, that is the type of financing that we need at this point when we are facing such an unpredictable future. The International Development Association is, of course, one of the sources of concessionary finance to developing countries, and it is good that we have access to such resources. But still, Madam President, assuming we stay on track with our repayments, it will be 2060, the year 2060, before we see the end of that commitment. Some of us will not be here in 2060. We may hope to be, but we probably won't. And so we are accountable today for what we do, because we are mortgaging the futures of children and grandchildren. And I cannot speak for others, but certainly for me that is a huge undertaking. $81 million is still a lot of money in a small country of our circumstances. So our concerns must be expressed, they must be considered, and hopefully they will produce some enlightenment. Among those concerns are the following. One, the terms as presented in the document I find are vague in terms of what the money is to be used for, and I think that we can do better as a matter of public record to improve upon the level of explanation that we bring to this House, and therefore what enters into Hansard and what is retrievable in the future, and what our own people in our own constituencies, those of us with constituencies, learn about the business of government, because this is also an educational project. It's an educational process for the people of Saint Lucia. So for those people who are concerned collectively about the indebtedness of our country, I think we can give them some more comfort. I think we can give them higher levels of explanation than the standard response, which is finding itself into most of the documentation these days, which says COVID-19 Response, Recovery, and Resilience Development Policy Program. That has become something of a catch-all phrase for all manner of things, and I don't think that it is sufficient. And in saying so, I want to also express gratitude to the leader of government business for the explanations provided in her remarks, which to me should be part of the paperwork which is circulated to senators and other members of the decision-making process. So if we can improve the level of detail, I think that we should. And I note particularly, although I cannot remember all of the notes, all of the explanations which she gave at this point, I did not have time to write down all of them, but she mentioned business continuity, which has been a message that needs to be developed. It needs to be communicated to the business sector so that they can position and they can plan and they can know that help is on the way. So if our government, in its wisdom, is contemplating directing resources towards business continuity, one, let us have that discussion with the business community. Two, let us help them to position and prepare so that we can have equal access to benefits and not on the basis of privileged information available to the few. So the more we can give information, particularly to the business sector, and I want to stress this because the business sector accounts for more than 80% of the economy. And sometimes we think that government is the be-all and the end-all, but it accounts for less than 20% of the entire GDP. So the rest of the economy needs to be empowered, and it needs to be considered. So in summary on that particular point, If help is on the way for the business community, let us engage them in the conversation and let us let them know that help is on the way so that they can position and they can be prepared. And it will not be a matter of the privileged few getting information early, knowing what is coming, and then those who may be most in need and least able to access will be the ones left behind. Next point, the question of how contracts are going to be awarded regarding works to be done and services to be delivered. I think at this point it is useful to know some of these things. Is there going to be a bidding process for goods as well as services? This is a substantial amount of money. If it is coming into the country on favorable terms, let it also be dispensed and disbursed on favorable terms so that it can have the sort of widespread impact that we are looking for. There was a time, Madam President, when you would see in the Gazette and in the papers, and I suppose now social media is relevant, to the effect that the government of Saint Lucia has received a loan or a grant of $35 million from the Caribbean Development Bank for the purposes of A, B, C, D, and E. And these notices would invite tenders, they would invite letters of interest, they would invite proposals, they would invite submissions of CVs or corporate profiles so that you could be shortlisted and your company or your agency might qualify for some consideration in terms of economic opportunity. This doesn't seem to be done anymore, and I would like to ask that we make an effort to return to those days, because such notices would also let us know what rules of procurement apply, what are the modalities for the disbursement of the funds, what are they going to be used for. That is what transparency requires of us, and I think that it is time that we return to those days. I mentioned that with reference to this loan because under the COVID-19 legislation, we must remember that in this House, passed in a rather unprecedented manner, the financial regulations were waived under the COVID-19 legislation, and we gave ourselves immunities and exemptions from prosecution and liability. So a responsible government, having given itself those powers, and as I said, in an unprecedented way, passage of legislation through this very House, the onus is on the government to be even more transparent than normal and to reassure the people and fellow parliamentarians that better is being done and that we can, in fact, be accountable even if we have waived certain procedural matters which are the norm. So in an emergency, yes, we have to do certain things, but that does not remove from the government the onus of transparency. And even if the procurement rules may be waived, we need to ensure that we are accountable and we remain accountable for the funds entrusted to us. So it is critical that transparency remains a paramount criteria for the use of any funds, including borrowed funds, but particularly borrowed funds, which is our subject at hand today. The business of getting a contract from a minister or a district rep is a bedrock for corruption. And we must ask, why has direct awards become the norm instead of the exception? Our financial traditions do not expect, did not predict that direct awards would be so widely used for the allocation of public resources. It is not transparent enough a process to protect us from the corruption that inevitably will occur. We need to return to processes of international bidding. Where's the tenders board? We used to have a national tenders board, and anything over a certain reasonable amount would go through the tenders board. This is no longer the case. And it is highly likely that government itself is not getting the best possible proposals from the number of suppliers who are out there. We have a project, and there's more than one, which is design, build, and construct. And the question is, where is the arm's length between those various functions? Because normally, one agency designs, therefore one agency would be involved in costing and verification of costing, another agency builds, and another agency monitors to ensure that the public, the people, the government, and the funding agency get the level of of quality and of quantity that they're supposed to get. Once you remove the arm's length between those functions, you run the risk of A, corruption, and B, not getting dollar value for your money. So the direct award is fine in an emergency, but 12 months is more than an emergency. And we need to start getting back to the business of proper processing of financial obligations. On that subject, Madam President, in the same COVID-19 legislation which was passed in this Honorable House, it contained an undertaking, if I'm not mistaken, that the Minister of Finance would report to Parliament every 6 months on matters like those which are sidestepped, in a sense, by the legislation, by the powers that he was granted under the emergency legislation. I am not aware that such a report has been tabled or presented, but I believe we have passed the 6-month, or very close to the 6-month deadline. And so an accounting by the Minister of Finance under the very legislation is now due. And that would also help with keeping the public informed and assuring us of proper procedures. Fiscal space. Madam President, we can borrow now, and that is great. That is something to be celebrated, that the financial sector still welcomes us, and our credit rating is such that we can borrow. But that is going to decline. Whether we like it or not, that is going to decline by virtue of the very amounts that we are borrowing. Yes, a bank will lend you money up to the point where you reach a certain level and their guidelines kick in and says to you, no, Mr. John, no, Mrs. James, you have now borrowed more than 3 times your salary, you can't get any more. This is what happens. This is what happens with countries. This is what happens with businesses. This is what happens with people. So we have to remember that not so long ago, our own domestic bank said to us, sorry, but we're not interested. We're not prepared to take on this risk. We have to, and that was from the Bankers Association. That was not from an individual bank. That was from the Bankers Association, which includes 2 local banks who you would think would be friendly to the government and understand its dire circumstances. And they wrote and said, sorry, sir, we can't lend you this money. We'll recall also that the proposal for bonds was not warmly embraced by the banks, and that fell through the cracks. So our ability to borrow now is by no means a guarantee of our ability to borrow later. And since we are not in control of all of our circumstances, it makes sense to be a little prudent with how, when, and how much we borrow. We want to keep the creditworthiness of the country. And the only way to do that is to maintain prudential guidelines. Those prudential guidelines are not set by Saint Lucia. They are set by international financial institutions and multilateral financial institutions, such as the World Bank, the EIB, which is the European Investment Bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, all of the people that we've borrowed huge sums of money from in the last few months. They are the ones who have established for all countries of the world a prudential guideline with respect of debt to GDP. So while it is true that we borrow all the time, we were not always borrowing with our backs against the wall. We were not always borrowing with a pandemic at our door. We were not always borrowing in exceptional circumstances such as this. And we were not borrowing with a debt to GDP ratio which stood at 90 to 95% in November. And it is my estimation that we are now very close to that cliff, I think that's the word that was used earlier, of 100% of GDP. Just based on the figures, we have reached that point of 100% of GDP. And that is a very dangerous position to be in, because we do not have a store of wealth or cash or reserves that we can call on in an emergency. That is to say, Madam President, that with this borrowing, we are somewhere close to 100% of every dollar that is earned by this economy over a year being represented by debt. So government, which accounts for less than 20%, and it's difficult to tell any more precisely than that because we do not have economic figures for 2020. But based on the trajectory, we can assume that government is less than 20% of the economy, and it has borrowed more than 100% of the value of the net worth of the economy, what we earn in 1 year. So that is a very dangerous situation to be in, and we have to have a very realistic understanding of what that means. The prudential guideline for countries is 60% of GDP. We are presumably at 100%, and in November, the Ministry of Finance said we were between 90 and 95. Nothing has done to improve the base, so it is highly improbable that we are very close or over 100% of GDP. That should be a red flag. That should be a huge red flag. The guideline, as I said, is not established by us. It is established by the very people that we borrow from. Caribbean Development Bank, World Bank, the IMF, all multilateral donors, all use 60% as the maximum a country should borrow. I say this in relation to this borrowing, which adds another $81 million, and I'm not sure why we are so fond of using US currency in a domestic currency situation like this. But it sounds better, I suppose, if we say 31 million as opposed to 81 million. But it's 81 million Eastern Caribbean dollars. That's what we earn. And we should denominate our debt wherever possible in the currency that we earn so that we can be very clear as to what it is. $81 million is still a lot of money in my little imagination. And I say this against the background of a 2020 IMF report, which I'm not going to quote from extensively, but is available if anybody needs the reference. It's 20/63, press release, February 24th, 2020. And it says, and I summarize, the commencement of large public infrastructure projects, including the redevelopment of the international airport and a comprehensive road improvement program, will push the public debt and weaken the external position. The external position is a reference to the balance of payments, which says what you owe, what you earn, vis-a-vis the rest of the world. It also says that the downside risk, that is the potential for disaster, the downside risk to Saint Lucia's outlook include a deeper than expected slowdown in major source markets for tourism, volatility in energy prices, which is not such a consideration right now, quite frankly, but disruptions to global financial markets. These are externalities that we must take into consideration as we enter into more and more debt because they are beyond our control. And there is nothing that we will be able to do about them except put our house in order and make sure that we have some buffering capacity in the event of those very risks, which is volatility in the financial markets, energy prices, which, as I said, is not such a risk, and what is happening in our tourism markets. Saint Lucia has a high vulnerability to natural disasters. We know that. That is an ever-present risk to both growth and the fiscal outlook. So where do we stand? Are we just hoping that we don't have a hurricane this year? We were very fortunate last year we did not have one come around and slap us in our face. But clearly we were in no position to withstand any natural disaster last year, and 2021 is no different. So we are at the point where either we have some magic prayer book somewhere, or seriously, we are exposed. Is there a store of liquidity? No, there is not. So what happens if we have a natural disaster? And I say this because we are borrowing up to the max. We do not have reserves. We don't have savings. The private sector is under risk, is under stress. What is our capacity? And especially when a lot of our friendlier governments are dealing with their own internal problems and are not necessarily able to come to our rescue in the ways that they would have when times were good. Are we just hoping that tourism will recover in order to have government revenues to service the debt existing? And I'm sure we're going to have more borrowing before the end of the fiscal year or shortly thereafter. Are we just hoping? Our projections, Madam President, for recovery of revenues have been off. They've been off by more than double. Our downturn in the economy has been twice what was originally predicted. So our ability to assess our situation as well as our ability to project a recovery from our situation have both been compromised, and the statistics are there in the November report by the Ministry of Finance that tells us we are in a worse position than we expected to be at that particular point in time. It is important at this point that we have a plan. And as we look forward to the laying of the estimates in this Honorable House, I would like to hope that there is some flexibility in the model that is presented, because we do not have any certainty about our revenue at this point in time. So I would like to think that we present a budget, as the government of Trinidad and Tobago does, based on volatile oil prices. The government of Trinidad and Tobago presents a budget that says, if the oil price is X, we will do this. If it is Y, we will do this. If it is Z, we will do this. And therefore it has a realistic sensitivity analysis built into the budgeting process, allowing for unforeseen circumstances. In our borrowing, such as this, $81 million, we are not seeing where the repayment plan features in our borrowing strategy. So I would like to hope that in the budget that is coming, we will have some sensitivity analysis built in and not just pretend that everything's going to be fine, because 2021 is likely to be a worse economic year than 2020. It would be good if the whole country can understand also that under a particular revenue scenario of X million dollars based on a recovery of whatever sectors, these will be our priorities. And if we do not realize that revenue from a recovery in our own economy and from a recovery in our source markets, then this is how we will adjust. So our priorities should be education at the top of my list. And I mentioned, as I have mentioned before, early childhood education, which was also mentioned earlier today. Employment, social stabilization, food security, youth vulnerability, creative industries, because that is what projects you forward, business recovery and continuity, and health best practice. And I am hoping that in the budget that is to be presented in this House, we will see a reflection of those priorities or similar priorities with a sensitivity analysis that says, if things are good, this is what we will do. If things are not so good, this is what we will do. And if things are terrible, this is how we will prioritize the areas of the economy that need the virus vaccine. In this case, the economic vaccine, an injection of critical funds to keep us alive. I would also like to mention that I am not speaking as someone who is sitting comfortably at home, imagining the worst. I am not speaking out of conjecture. I'm speaking as someone who has been in communities, giving out masks, handing out hand sanitizer, encouraging compliance with the protocols, and listening to people in Cooley Town, in Odlum City, in Bar Saint Joseph, in Mondo, Dennery, Micoud, Labrie, Viewfort, Choiseul, and speaking to young men sitting under almond trees at 2 o'clock in the morning, with 2 o'clock in the afternoon, with absolutely nothing to do, and a bottle of rum between the 5 of them, and wondering, how do we recover from this? We are now some $3 billion in debt. Maybe that's not a lot, but maybe if we break it down, it will become more real. With 184,000 people, it means we are in debt to the tune of $16,304 per person. For every man, woman, and child in Saint Lucia, that is what we are responsible for. And that's not counting the interest. That's just the stock of debt. We have not begun to talk about the debt service. And the debt service includes the interest and any other charges that may accrue. So that's $16,304 that each of us in this country owes, man, woman, and child, to the rest of the world. How many of us can pay that? So when we speak of $3 billion owed by Saint Lucia, and when we speak about a loan that is not going to get repaid until 2060, that's what we're talking about. That's the obligation that we are creating in this room on behalf of the citizens of Saint Lucia. And so when people ask for explanation, they are not to be derided. They are not to be made fools of. They are to be treated as representatives of the citizenry who are asking for clarity on the business of the people. And there is nothing wrong with that. And even if they have political motives, that is for them to decide. The question is valid with or without political motives. And we are accountable for $16,304 per person as we enter into this loan of 81 million EC dollars.
Senator, you have 15 more minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. The debt service, on the other hand, is a matter of cash flow. Even with the best intentions, we cannot predict at this time what our cash flow position will be. And cash flow is just what money you have in your hand to pay the bank when that date falls due. Not tomorrow, not next week, it falls due today. And even if you have money coming in tomorrow, that is of no concern to the bank. They want their money today. You cannot pay today, you are in default. You are in default, all your other stock of debt falls into question. So for us to go happily along, pretending that we don't need a plan, that we don't need to create some dedicated revenue stream to service this debt, which we have not heard about, and we have heard in this House that we will not borrow unless there is a dedicated revenue stream to liquidate the debt. We have heard that in this House. And yet still we are presenting requests for borrowing, and we're not saying where the repayment is going to come from. And even if it's wishful thinking, do us the honor of saying we propose a tax, we propose a mechanism, we propose some setting aside of resources from some source which is going to help us liquidate this debt when it becomes due. Without that, Madam President, we are being reckless. We need to create such mechanisms in our financial planning at the time of entering into the debt. It's called hedging, so that we know we are making provision for the liquidation of that $16,304, and I left out the 40 cents, that we are entering into, that we are mortgaging the futures of children and grandchildren. Every housewife knows that you can, but you should not buy groceries with your credit card. You can. The supermarket will accept it. But you cannot create debt upon debt upon debt without some understanding of how it is going to be liquidated. And so the general rule is that you shouldn't buy groceries with a credit card. You buy really important things with a credit card. Of course, if you're starving, you have no choice. But who wants to starve? So it's not sustainable. And what will give us comfort is to know that whatever situation we are in, 3 billion, 4 billion, 5 billion, it really doesn't matter. The question is it sustainable? And it is not everything that you can do, that you should do. So I must confess that I'm very worried when the Minister of Finance seems to casually say that we managed to borrow $500 million in 6 months. Is that a feather in our cap? Yes, it speaks to our creditworthiness now, but what does it speak to in terms of our liability later on? And the rate of accumulation of the debt is also very, very important. So that sort of boast, I'm not sure is useful, because anyway, I'll leave out the adjective. I am reminded, nevertheless, Madam President, as I close, of a recent social media clip of a man who drank a whole bottle of rum in about 6 seconds. Of course he could. He could and he did. But he was carried away in an ambulance and was dead within hours. So it's not everything we can do that we should do. And it's not everything that we can do that does not have consequences. So we need, at the time of taking an action which mortgages the future of children and grandchildren, have a plan in place for the things we see and the things we cannot see. This is a country we are running. The shareholders are the citizens. We are just the appointed keepers for the time being. We have to leave the company in good shape when we go. And as I said, most of us will not be here in 2060. So let us do the right thing. We can and we must. Thank you.
Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, this resolution is to borrow $30 million US to finance the Recovery and Resilience Development Policy Program of the government of Saint Lucia. Madam President, this is all about managing COVID. And I heard opposition senators say we do not need to be borrowing to manage COVID. Some words to that effect, Madam President. And he mentioned that we have the people in society who are willing to, do certain things that can assist in the management of COVID. But, Madam President, we would welcome any suggestion that the fellow senator may put forward to guide us in terms of other ways we can find without having to borrow to manage COVID. Somehow, Madam President, I do not know that we can finance our social programs without borrowing. I do not know that we can continue to provide so many services to our people without additional financing, given that we are not collecting the revenue that we projected we would have collected during this period. Madam President, and I heard the call for a report on the spending expenditure for health so far. I am aware that we brought in a report towards the end of January, I think the sitting before the last, and the report was circulated, but nobody made any comments about the report. It was directly from the Ministry of Health. It was circulated in the lower house, and also when I came to the upper house, to the Senate, I got a copy of that document. And there was no mention of that document by anyone in terms of the funds that were expended for the respiratory hospital, having to move prematurely into OKEU so that we could retrofit the other facility. It mentioned the purchase of PPEs and many other activities that we have undertaken at the Ministry of Health in our COVID effort. And there was no mention. But, Madam President, we can always provide the reports. The Ministry of Finance staff stand ready to provide those reports to us, and these reports can be made available. We do not even have to come to this house to ask for these reports. We can always ask for them from the Ministry of Finance. As senators and parliamentarians, it will be made available to them. But, Madam President, there is so much interest now in the management of COVID. And I can recall when the COVID bill came to this House. Our senators were not even present. They absented themselves, and deliberately so. And now we are getting all the questions about how much is spent, where it is, what is it spent for, and so on and so forth. Leader of Opposition Business mentioned that we ought to stop the blame game, or words to that effect, Madam President. But on the one hand, he went on to say that. On the one side of his mouth, he said that. And on the other side, he said, the government dropped the ball. And he said that that came from the Minister of Health, which of course I stood up and informed him at the time that that was not the case. But he still went on to make the point that the government dropped the ball. So, Madam President, if that is not playing a blame game, I do not know what is. And this is why I say when we come to this Honorable House, I like to remind fellow senators that we are coming here to debate resolutions that are clearly stated on paper. But to say that we ought not to play the blame game and start in the game yourself, I believe is a bit disingenuous. Madam President, I heard a call for the way that the Ministry of Health reports the cases. So somebody said 7 cases out of 27 and 2 deaths. The deaths should be reported first, and so on and so forth. I do not know that there is any country that reports the deaths from COVID first on their reports. I have yet to see that. So you will pardon me if I cannot acquiesce to that sort of request, because I know that the Ministry of Health follows a format in terms of reporting. They are reporting to the country and not to politicians or parliamentarians. These reports go out every day on a daily basis as they get the reports, sometimes late, sometimes early, sometimes the next day, depending on when they get the reports, Madam President. But the report comes in that format.
Just to stop you, Senator, when you say somebody said, I am assuming you mean a fellow senator.
Yes, Madam President.
So in the report, and you say somebody says, it's not clear. You could be speaking about somebody on the outside. So we should always refer to fellow members as senators or honorable members.
I am so guided, Madam President. Thank you. So our report goes, and I'll give you an example, 7 cases out of 27 samples that were tested for that day, 168 recoveries. This is the last report that went out. 197 active cases, 2 deaths, both were with underlying conditions, and we give a little bit more detail. I have observed, Madam President, that we seem to like to focus on the doom and gloom. We never ever mention the active cases that we have in country. But we continue to say that we have 3,000 and something cases. We do not have 3,000 and something cases, Madam President. We have tested that number of cases. We have had positive cases, but right now we have 197 active cases, which is what is important. It is the active cases and the positives that we need to focus on, because this is what the problem is for us as a country. How many active cases do we have currently, and how many positive cases do we have? Currently, we have 197 active cases of COVID. The recoveries are not even so significant, because out of most of our cases, most people recover, except for the people that, that pass on. So I am just saying this so that we can try to focus on the positive when we are looking at the way that the Ministry of Health, the frontline workers are trying to contain this virus, and exactly what it is that we have on our hands to work with. So the cases are reducing, are on the decline, and that is a very good thing. Hopefully they can continue to decline up to a point where we will continue to maintain that we can contain the cases that we have. Madam President, and I will go on in terms of the testing, because there's a lot of concern about the testing. The testing for February 1st to February 17th, the report was 218 cases out of 585 that was sampled. Out of a sample of 585, we had 218 cases over a period of February 1st to February 17th. That's 16 days testing. When you average it, Madam President, you get in 14 cases per day. And you have about 36 cases, 36 tests per day, and out of the 36, you had about 14 cases per day. That's the average for February 1st to February 17th. The next report that came out gave you February 18th and February 19th. So if a person were to say that the reports are not consistent in terms of the time period over which the testing is done, that is understandable. So February 18th, we had 55 positives out of 187 cases. Then we had 2 positive cases out of 81 cases, out of 81 samples on February 19th. That is still averaging. That is still, on February 19th, we had a high amount. So you have 2 cases out of 81 samples. On February 20th, Madam President, we had 7 positive cases out of 91 samples. This is for 1 day. But when we give a range, a whole number of days, testing over 5-6 days, then people have to take it and break it down, and then you get the average per day. On February 23rd, we had 7 positive cases out of 27 cases, and this is what the fellow senator was talking about. So now on February 20th and February 23rd, we had 7 positive cases on both of these days. So some people will jump on that and say, oh, how can they have the same number of cases each day? But Madam President, it happens, and it is not each day. But for 2 consecutive days of testing, we had 7 cases. However, the samples were 91 samples on 1 day and 27 samples on another day. So I am saying this to say, Madam President, that if a person is really paying attention, the report is not so erroneous. You can understand it, and I believe that it is fitting the purpose for which they are putting it out, to inform the public of the cases we have and how the testing is going, as well as the fact that our cases are on the decline because people are following the protocols, and we are asking that they continue to follow the protocols. So you are seeing the result of people following the protocols, Madam President. Now I heard, Madam President, from fellow senators that out of 51 deaths, Saint Lucia had 34 in the OECS, and so on. But one has to ask the question, out of the OECS countries, where we are looking at the number of deaths, the 51 and so on, that we have the highest numbers and so on. Did we have in any of these countries a match right in the middle of COVID? And we are saying, don't play the blame game and let's not go back and forth. But we must learn by our mistakes. And we must not try to lay the blame on somebody else when it really should be laid on us. We were very happy prior to that match on the spike that we were containing the virus. We were containing the virus satisfactorily. The staff of the Ministry of Health, the frontline workers, the lab workers, they were very, very satisfied that they were on the job and they were seeing the result of their hard work, Madam President. We must not lose sight of that fact. Because to make mistakes and not to learn is to make the same mistakes again. So, Madam President, I am saying, which of these OECS countries, with the good record that we are tooting all over the place, which of these OECS countries had an opposition that was careless enough to have a huge match right in the middle of a pandemic, Madam President? Which one? None of them. And these people take responsibility for their numbers because they know that they made every effort to keep those numbers down. How do you feel? How would you feel, Madam President? How do you think the workers who are working so hard feel or felt at the time when they knew they had it under control, only to see this match and people jumping up and down, no mask, no social distancing, mass crowd event? For these same workers to see this happening and for the following weeks to put up with that spike. Madam President, we have people, workers in the lab, who barely get 4 hours sleep a night before they go back to that lab. And what do our people do? They come and complain about how those tests, how come we have this backup? This is not working, that is not good, they are not giving us the right numbers. We have no confidence in the numbers. Why? Is that how we reward those hard-working public servants? I know many of them, Madam President. I stay up late at night. 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm awake. So when they send the messages, I get them. And you see that same person is back at work at 8 o'clock in the morning. You know that person has not had a lot of sleep. Testing in the lab, Madam President. Because you see, Madam President, while COVID is on, we do have the regular work of the healthcare workers also ongoing. It is not only COVID that they have to take care of. They have to take care of our patients with diabetes. They have to take care of all these other people, the other clinics. Sometimes you hear people complaining they had to close a clinic because somebody, nurses and doctors, are coming down with COVID. So they've had to close down a clinic or two. And to hear the complaints, Madam President, I can understand when we cannot get service or services cut off. Yes, we may be disappointed, but remember, it is because a doctor came down with COVID. And that doctor, when you do the contact tracing, you have about 8 nurses going home. So the shortage of staff and human resource capacity that we speak of, again, we have to go back to COVID. We have to go back to COVID, Madam President. And remember, Madam President, that hospital, OKEU, was just recently commissioned, just before COVID struck. So while we were still getting our business organized in the hospital, we had to put up with a pandemic on our hands. And what do our citizens do? Many of them, they complain. We do not hear the voices of those people who show gratitude, you know, but I do. And occasionally when it comes, it makes us know that we are being rewarded for the work that we are doing. The workers, the frontline workers, are being rewarded for the hard work they are doing. So, Madam President, I hope that with this small explanation, as small as it might be, because we cannot be here all day, or all night, or tomorrow, day after, and some of these discussions can continue forever, that I have been able to shed a little light on the whole issue of testing and reporting from our healthcare workers. So the decline in testing is not as a result of no reagents, which would be the doom and gloom that we bring on. So testing is declining. We say, is it because there's no? They have reagents. They have reagents, but you can only test what you did to test. The oxygen plant, Madam President, that my fellow senator spoke on, it is a very good idea. But I want to assure him that we have an oxygen plant, production plant, that is being installed at the St. Jude's Hospital in the free zone area by the St. Jude Hospital. And that plant will be able to supply all our public healthcare facilities with oxygen. It's supposed to be commissioned. It's supposed to be commissioned by April the 1st, but of course, we will have to see how that goes, but it will be commissioned very soon. Okay? So, Madam President, because we are not tooting our horns and making noise, and it doesn't mean that we are not working. Work is going on. We are working. We are looking at all the gaps in our system, and we are moving to fill those gaps, Madam President, as we speak. The oxygen plant is one such example where we had the vision to see that we would be needing oxygen. And since we are going to be reopening a new St. Jude Hospital sooner rather than later, that an oxygen production plant for the country would be a very good addition to our resources for healthcare. Madam President, my fellow senator expressed concern over the social safety net programs that we have in Saint Lucia, where sometimes a person works a whole month or so and the salary is so very low. You know that a lot of our people need social support to augment their salary and the little money that they get to take home. And of course, prior to the advent of COVID, my government was working on looking at a lot of the restructuring many of our social programs. And this is why we had already increased the funds for special needs person. We had already increased that. But of course, we had to shelve many of our social support programs as a result of course, lack of funds and so on and so forth. But I want to assure her that the funds that we are requesting now will address some budgetary constraints. They are also to augment our, it's also for budget financing, Madam President. And of course, we have initiatives in our budget to address some of our social programs. There is an initiative, a social stabilization program, an economic and resilient plan that is going to address some of these issues that you have mentioned. And of course, additional investment in health. Most of the monies that we are borrowing has a component that goes into additional investment in health. The equipment at OKEU, we have had a bit of a setback. Again, because of COVID, we had a team of people come in from India to activate some of those pieces of equipment that we have that our own people are not able to cause to function. And these people are stuck outside of the country. They are not able to travel to Saint Lucia up to this point because you have to get an exit visa from India to get out of the country. So we have to put that off for a little while. I was told that they are in the process of trying to get these visas. And when they get on island, they will be able to assist us in getting our MRI machine and those kinds of machines that we have at OKEU functioning again. But because we do have some of these machines and they are not functioning. Madam President, and of course to beef up our testing capacity, if I can go back to that, because I know one of our senators are very concerned. We have the forensic lab we've been mentioning. They have been preparing themselves to come on board. They've had a few hiccups, but I was told that as of this week, they should be up and running. So again, we are going to get some additional support for our testing, to beef up our testing capacity. I want to assure my fellow senator that government has a procurement process that has not changed. It has not been stopped, as I heard. The tenders board is very much still engaged and still active, but it is not everything that goes to the central tenders board. There is a management process. They oversee the tenders process, but like I said, it is not every project that goes to the central tenders board. Neither is it any amount. There are small amounts that do not necessarily have to go to the central tenders board. The ministries handle these themselves and the different project heads, and it is only if the project has a component that has to go out to tender that you will see them engage a tendering process. Madam President, and we tend to hear a lot about our GDP and our debt and so on, but from the onset of COVID, Madam President, I personally heard the IMF boss say that no country, given the onset of COVID, no country should concern themselves at this point in time with GDP. And that is a lady that understood what it would take to contain, for countries to contain this virus, especially small island developing states that do not have funds to fall back on. They do not print their own money. So if we are hearing it from the top, who are we to think that we need to be so overly concerned at this point in time when we are experiencing a pandemic? This is a crisis, it's a disaster, for us to be so concerned and consumed with managing the GDP? Do we allow our citizens to starve because we are obsessed with managing our GDP? For lack of a better word, obsessed, Madam President, because we cannot focus so much on GDP that we allow our people to go hungry, that we allow the businesses in our country to fall on the wayside, Madam President. We must do whatever we can. We must borrow in order for us to assist our small businesses, in order for us to continue our social programs, Madam President. We have an economy to run. We allow the people at the Ministry of Finance to concern themselves with the GDP, and I tell you these days they are scratching their heads. I am sorry for these public workers who have to try and make ends meet when they do not see any revenue coming in to government. But they have to continue to pay bills. They have to continue to get the monies to pay rent. They have to continue to get monies to pay public servants, Madam President. And that is on the top of the list every month. We must secure the funds to pay our public workers. That is the priority. That is of paramount importance, Madam President. So we are not going to be overly concerned about GDP at this point in time. And Madam President, that is another reason why we have to continue to keep our borders open. Because tourism now is our mainstay. And as you know, tourism was the first to collapse under COVID-19. So some of us speak on one side of our mouths, we say one thing. On the other side, we are asking for something. And some of us, we fill up our mouths and ask for everything. You cannot have your cake and eat it too, Madam President. We need to borrow so that we can finance the activities in our country. We can continue to support our people, especially our poor people, the poor and the marginalized, Madam President, the people who, whatever they had saved is now finished. They need to eat. They need to drink, they have to feed their families. So we cannot overly concern ourselves with GDP. Our first priority is to take care of the people in our country. And of course, I know that the people at the Ministry of Finance are doing a lot of what-if analysis, SWOT analysis, and they are doing everything they possibly can. But unless we get some economic activity going, Madam President, the coffers will remain empty. And if they remain empty, then what is going to happen? What is going to become of us? We are making a lot of demands, but where will the money come from? We must open up our economy, Madam President, and that is another priority. Financing our social programs, feeding our people, keeping our economy afloat, sustaining the economy, keep our borders open. Let us look at programs to put in place so that we can help our economy recover. I do not hear anything about the vaccine, Madam President. For some reason, we know that this may well be the help that we need to get back on our feet. But no one is talking about how the vaccine can roll out and, of course, help us to get our economy back on the right track. That is the hope, Madam President, but I don't hear people tooting that hope.
Leader of Opposition,
I rise on a point of order. The member is misleading the House to suggest that no one has spoken about the vaccine. I spent about 5 minutes even making suggestions and mentioning the models that the other countries use and the Caribbean neighbors who assisted us. I even asked for accountability on how much will be spent on vaccines. So to say so, madam, is grossly misleading.
Sustained.
Madam President, if that was the case, I am sorry about that. I must have missed it somehow. Maybe it was so, I don't know, I must have missed it, Madam President. I can vaguely recall there may have been a mention, but what I'm saying is, you do not have the emphasis on the vaccine. We do not have people saying, going out there and saying to people, we need to take the vaccine. We need our supporters to take the vaccine. We haven't heard that. The same way, Madam President, we were not hearing people saying, initially, we have COVID on island. Make sure you wear your mask. That came very late from many of our leaders, many of our parliamentarians, opposition parliamentarians. That came very late, Madam President, if at all.
Madam President, I again
Leader of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Madam. I again stand on the same point of order. Madam President,
just a second.
in my presentation...
Just a second, Senator. Leader of Government Business, would you like to take a seat? It's a point of order. Is it, Senator?
Yes, Madam President. I think it is, it is disingenuous for the Leader of Government Business to refer to issues that I can account for, particularly in my presentation, when I made reference to clubs and organizations that within my own perimeter, in my constituency, well, my community, that have been engaging in these activities. And I specifically pointed out encouraging people to wear masks. And after having mentioned the issue of not picking up on what I said, when I spoke about the vaccines, and now she's repeating the same, I think she really ought to try not to do so. I think this is really dishonest, Madam President, and I am offended by it.
Senator, she said persons in the Senate. She did not say that you, in particular, Leader of Government Business, of Opposition Business.
Madam, she did say persons in the Senate, and I am a member. And she made reference to the Leader of Opposition.
I'm just clarifying that she said leaders. She said in the House, in the Senate, in the House, wherever. But you are pointing to the fact that you specifically said this earlier. She's making a general statement.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I am speaking about from the time COVID started in March of last year.
Senator, you can move along. That's what I was trying to point out, that you were not speaking specifically on this, at this sitting, generally.
Thank you very much, Madam President. But I am trying to point out, Madam President, that we need all the help we can because COVID-19 is a global pandemic. It is something that is taking place throughout the length and breadth of the world. And when it comes to Saint Lucia, all our parliamentarians, upper house, lower house, all leaders, all institutions ought to get on board and do what is necessary. And we were not seeing that for a very long time, Madam President. This is what I'm saying. And we still need everybody to come on board. And when the Ministry of Health prescribe a solution or give out advice, it is for us as people of this country, it is for us as leaders, parliamentarians, and everyone to embrace that advice and pass it on to our supporters, pass it on to our workers, pass it on to our people. This is the point I'm trying to make, Madam President. I'm not trying to make anybody look bad, Madam President. I'm simply saying we need help to contain this virus. And it is not to point fingers. It is not only to talk about GDP when you know for a fact that we have to spend money for us to sustain the economy, for us to cater to our social programs. We all know people out there who are suffering. We all know people who worked in the hotels, in the tourism industry, on the cruise ships, and now for months they haven't had a salary. So where is government going to take the money to help these people, Madam President? And it is not that you help them today and tomorrow they don't need to eat. We need to help, and we need to continue helping and assisting our people, assisting our economy, opening the businesses. When the numbers start to go down, the CMO, we get the technical advice, we get the command center. They get together every morning at 8:30, they have a meeting to have discussions, to get reports on what has happened the day before, and so on and so forth, and to advise the cabinet of ministers. And then we come up with the policy decisions that we expect our country, our citizens to embrace, pass on, and let us all try to continue to contain the virus, Madam President. So far, we are doing a great job. We are seeing the figures are going down. Let us concern ourselves with that. The numbers of active cases are going down. Let us concern ourselves with that, and let us move on, Madam President. I thank you very much, Madam President.
Senators, the question is that Parliament authorize the Minister of Finance to borrow an amount of US $30 million from the International Development Association to finance the COVID-19 response, recovery, and resilience development policy program. Be it further resolved that A, the maximum commitment charge rate payable on the unwithdrawn financing balance is 0.5% per annum. B, a service charge is payable on the withdrawn credit balance that is equal to the greater of 1, the sum of 0.75% per annum plus the basis adjustment, and 2, 0.75% per annum. C, the loan is repayable in 40 years from the date of first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 10 years. D, the principal amount of the loan is repayable on each 15th day of May and 15th day of November at the rate of 1% of the loan amount commencing on the 15th day of May 2031 and including the 15th day of November 2040, and 2% of the loan amount commencing from the 15th day of May 2041 and including the 15th day of November 2060. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 63(1) of the Public Finance Management Act, number 14 of 2020, the Act, that the Minister of Finance may, by an affirmative resolution of Parliament, borrow from a bank or other financial institution for the capital or current expenditure of government, and whereas it is further provided by Section 64 of the Act that money borrowed by the government must be paid into and form part of the consolidated fund, and whereas by resolution of Parliament published as statutory instrument number 27 of 2015, Parliament authorized the Minister of Finance to borrow from the Caribbean Development Bank an amount not exceeding $19,675,000 US, consisting of a special funds resources portion in the amount of $6 million US and an ordinary capital resources portion in the amount of US $13,675,000,000. In this resolution referred to as the loan agreement for the purpose of financing the redevelopment of the Viewfort water supply. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to amend the loan agreement, A, to borrow from the Caribbean Development Bank an additional amount from its ordinary capital resources, not exceeding US $7,387,000, which consists of an amount of United States dollars 4,178,000 from the equity and market resources of the Caribbean Development Bank, additional E&M tranche, and an amount of United States dollars 3,200,000 allocated from the European Investment Bank, Climate Change Action Line of Credit, additional EIB, CALC tranche, in this resolution referred to as the amended loan agreement to assist in financing the 6th Viewfort Water Supply Redevelopment Project. B, to change the interest rate payable in the ordinary capital resources portion withdrawn and outstanding from time to time. 1, in the case of the European Investment Bank Climate Change Action Line of Credit tranche, from 2.23% to 2% per annum. 2, in the case of the equity and market tranche, from 3.95% to 3.75% per annum. C, to insert the commitment charge at the rate of 1% per annum on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion on withdrawn from time to time and which accrues. 1, in the case of the loan agreement from the 6th day after the date of the loan agreement. 2, in the case of the amended loan agreement from the 6th day after the date of the amended loan agreement. From the 16th day after the date of the amended loan agreement. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow from the Caribbean Development Bank an additional amount from its ordinary capital resources not exceeding United States dollars 7,378,000, which consists of an amount of United States dollars 4,178,000 from the equity and market resources of the Caribbean Development Bank, additional E&M tranche, and an amount of United States dollars 3,200,000 allocated from the European Investment Bank to the Caribbean Development Bank under the Climate Change Action Line of Credit, additional EIB, CALC tranche to assist in financing the 6th Viewfort Water Supply Redevelopment Project. Be it further resolved that A, the interest rate payable on the ordinary capital resources portion withdrawn and outstanding from time to time is 1, in the case of the European Investment Bank, Climate Change Action Line of Credit tranche 2% per annum. 2, in the case of the equity and market tranche, 3.75% per annum. B, the commitment charge is paid at the rate of 1% per annum on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion on withdrawn from time to time, and which accrues 1, in the case of the loan agreement from the 16th day after the date of the loan agreement, and 2, in the case of the amended loan agreement from the 16th day after the date of the amended loan agreement.
Leader of Government Business, that should be, and I'm asking, 60th day, so C.
60th day.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Madam President.
On each occasion, that would be C1 and B1 for the record.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks. B1 and B2.
That's correct. B1 and B, C1 and B2. Now, you know it's B1. They're both 1.
B1 and B2.
Proceed. Proceed.
Madam President, this resolution before us, this Senate today, is a request to borrow an additional $7,378,000 US from the Caribbean Development Bank to continue the Viewfort Water Redevelopment Project. This ongoing project, Madam President, is an approved project in the estimates of revenue and expenditure. It is a project that includes the Dennery Water Supply, or maybe I should say it started with the Dennery Water Supply Redevelopment Project and the Viewfort Water Supply Redevelopment Project. The loan will finance additional infrastructural works, including replacement of an existing water treatment facility, transmission mains, and the addition of 2 new water storage reservoirs. The addition of a Viewfort watershed protection and management component comprising reforestation, public education and awareness, technical assistance for the designs of erosion control measures, a WASCO operational and energy efficiency program, and the engagement of a community liaison officer. For decades, Madam President, the communities of Viewfort and Dennery have experienced poor water quality and unreliable water supply. It is envisaged that this project will provide the residents of these communities and environs with a sustainable and reliable water system. The resolution establishes the lenders, the terms and conditions of the additional amount requested, as well as a reduction in the interest rates from 3.95% to 3.75%, and for the equity market resources component from 2.23% to 2%. Very concessionary rates, Madam President. This additional loan amount is necessary at this time as a result of a revision in terms of the scope of the project to ensure climate proofing of the project, as well as to cover the increased cost of supplies incurred as a result of delays of the project between 2015 and 2019 at the time of the revision. Madam President, I submit this resolution for approval of this Honorable House.
Senator Jean-Pierre. Apologies, Leader of Opposition Business. Senators, the question is that Parliament authorize the Minister of Finance to borrow from the Caribbean Development Bank an additional amount from its ordinary capital resources not exceeding US $7,378,000, which consists of an amount of US $4,178,000 from the equity and market resources of the Caribbean Development Bank, additional E&M tranche, and an amount of $3,200,000 US allocated from the European Investment Bank to the Caribbean Development Bank under the Climate Change Action Line of Credit, additional EIB CALC tranche, to assist in financing the 6th Viewfort Water Supply Redevelopment Project. Be it further resolved that A, the interest rate payable on the ordinary capital resources portion withdrawn and outstanding from time to time is 1. In the case of the European Investment Bank, Climate Change Action Line of Credit tranche 2% per annum. 2. In the case of the equity and market tranche, 3.75% per annum. B. The commitment charge is paid at the rate of 1% per annum on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion unwithdrawn from time to time, and which accrues 1. In the case of the loan agreement from the 60th day after the date of the loan agreement, and 2. In the case of the amended loan agreement from the 60th day after the date of the amended loan agreement. Senator Jean-Pierre.
Good afternoon, Madam President. Good afternoon, Senators. I take this opportunity to air my voice on this resolution. Madam President, I am indeed very happy and I should say very elated at this resolution. Indeed, It is a loan that will enhance the quality of life not only in Viewfort South, but also Viewfort North and Labrie. Madam President, water is life, and water has been a problem for the communities that formed Viewfort North, Labrie, and to a lesser extent, Viewfort South. I can tell you a lot about the struggles of the people of the Labrie community when it comes to water, because I live in Labrie and I live in the countryside of Labrie Bands. For this matter, last week, the people of Laho in the Bands area remained without water for 3 weeks, and that is critical. I had reasons to call WASCO and to try and find a resolution to this matter. I am even more elated that this project started under the last regime in 2015. And this is what we call compassionate government. The United Workers' Party government did not stop this project. And I am very happy about this. And this is what government is supposed to be, a continuation, because the people continue to live. So we as leaders, government is supposed to be a continuation, and what one start, the other should finish on behalf of the people. So this is why I am very happy about this project likewise. Madam President, we are living in extreme times, and we are living at a particular time in our juncture where we have seen quite a bit. We have heard a lot have been said, and I do not think that we should take for granted the times that we are living in. Madam President, despite the difficult times that we are living, I do not think that it is gloom and doom for us. And like our 42nd independence film says, we can and we will, I think so. Because at 42, I think we should be mature enough to know where we are going. And that is a rightful age. If we get to 42 and we don't know what we're about, I think we will miss the boat. Madam President, we hear a lot of to and fro about what should be done and what is working and what is not working. I would like to see that when it comes to COVID, the protocols are working. It is us that are not keeping the protocols. That is why the protocols are not working. I must report, and I must say that I am from the taxi sector. And from the time the country was reopened in June and we start receiving flights in July, we have the distinction of not recording a single case of COVID within the taxi sector. And I commend my colleagues for a job well done with regards to the keeping of the protocols. So I am saying to the rest of the citizens, let us keep the protocols that have been put in place, and at the end of the day, we will see the results. Enough said about blame, about this, about that. I am indeed happy that this government, under the leadership of this Prime Minister, have done tremendously well for the South. The South of Saint Lucia is the bedrock of the Saint Lucia Labour Party when it comes to support. And that's where I'm from. So the politics of the South, I know very well. And I think this current Prime Minister, Honorable Alan Chasney, I can go on record of saying is one or maybe the leading Prime Minister with regards to development as far as the south of the island is concerned. Even more so when it comes to the increase of the water supply, it is indeed based on the developments that are earmarked for the south. Definitely, we need an increased water supply in the south. The people of Labrie will definitely benefit. We are already seeing the construction of a new water tank at the foot of Mont Leblanc. So I know that we will benefit from this improvement of water supply. Madam President, there are a few projects that have started in the south. We have the new airport terminal, which will need increased water. The cruise ship terminal, which is earmarked for Port Viewfort, with home porting being a priority, will also need increased water. So it is coming at a time when preparation is being made with regards to the future, because we know the future is not doomed. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Madam President, we've heard a lot of to and fro when it comes to DSH, St. Jude's, and everything else. I need not to go back there, but I can say to this Honorable House that the DSH project is indeed an addition to our tourism product, which is sports tourism. And as everything else in the world, tourism is affected maybe by everything else, more than everything else, by this pandemic. But I am convinced that it is tourism that is going to bring us back there more quickly. Madam President, I know, because inquiries have already been made as a business person within the tourism industry, I am already getting inquiries about Saint Lucia for 2022. So I know that there is hope. And I can tell fellow Saint Lucians and fellow taxi operators like myself, be not dismayed. Hold the fort. Continue, practice the social distancing and the different protocols that have been put in place by the Ministry of Health and our CMO. Madam President, I hear a lot of pronouncements about who is best or who is this. All I know is that there's only one government that have had to deal with a pandemic in Saint Lucia, and this is this government. Most likely, there will be no other government that will be called to deal with the situation of this pandemic, because the record of this government have shown that it is more than capable of handling the affairs of this country. Madam President, the emphasis placed on the South have yielded much benefit to our people, and not just the people of the South, but people from all over St. Lucia. I heard a lot of criticism about Ojo Labs. Madam President, to date, Ojo Labs is employing over 300 young people from all over St. Lucia. And they are able to work from home because of the work that they are doing. ITEL BPO was also introduced, which currently employed over 400 young people. And we have young people from Grozile to the north, to Soufra and Canries to the west. It is creating other avenues for people in the south, because persons who doesn't want the distance in travel is renting homes, and there are young people renting homes. I am guided not to say my constituency, my community, Labrie, Auger.
Leader of Opposition Business.
Thank you, Madam President. I stand on a point of order, 37-1. I've resisted that because this is the colleague's first speaking opportunity for the day. While I've heard him talk about COVID and other areas not related to the subject, I think that at this point, he should be guided, Madam President, because he's now going on a tangent with Audio Labs, and the issue before us is really water redevelopment. So I think he, while I would really love to, I have no problems with him because it's his first, but I really think he should be guided that he doesn't overdo it, Madam President. In all good faith.
Senator, unless you can tie what you're saying to the debate of the water
Very much so, Madam President.
Please move along.
Very much so, Madam President. Coincidentally, Madam President, I happen to be the chairman of the Free Zone Management Authority. And when Audio Labs was established, through my board, we had to allow Saint Lucia to tap into our sewer system in order to increase the water capacity for Audio Labs. So when I speak in a position of authority because I know exactly what I'm speaking about, Madam President. However, we will continue. Madam President, we see since the establishment of the Free Zone Management Authority, again, under the Labour Party, 20 years ago, the year 2000, I am tying what has happened in the South, historically, the bedrock of the Saint Lucia Labour Party, with reference to what is happening today under this government, under the guidance of this Prime Minister. And I think the Prime Minister is very genuine about the development of the South, because whereas the south of Saint Lucia, where I am from, was earmarked as the new frontier for decades, it is only today that we are seeing truly the fulfillment of this new frontier. Madam President, when we took over government in 2016, and I became the chairman of the Free Zone Management Authority in 2016. To date, this is why I said all is not lost. Even in the current environment that we are in, we are seeing the free zone, we are short of space. Today, we are operating at 100% capacity. And this is the first time, 2020 became the first time that the free zone in Viewfort has operated at 100% capacity. When I became chairman, it was operating at about 70 to 75%. So we are seeing, despite the fact that there are some hardship, but there are some positives, and there are good things happening in the south of the island, which my honorable leader of opposition business should be aware, Madam President, because he is from the constituency of Miku South, and one of the constituencies which has been transformed in the last 4 to 5 years, which I even have an issue with, because I am looking for my fair share in this development. So I know you have an able district representative that has taken good care of you, and I am trying to tap into some of this for my people in Library. So this is where we stand, because I know the leader of opposition business knows very well that he's in good hands. He knows that. Madam President, as I come to a close, we heard an argument of sometimes we flip-flop a bit, because there are times we hear road is not important, let us give the people, use the financing for the people. But I'll tell you, Madam President, we have a situation where there are some communities in Saint Lucia where road is more than important. And within my district, I continue to agitate for my people in Majomel, because they need road more than anything else. Madam President, I would like to place on the record that I'm urging Saint Lucians, particularly my taxi drivers on the front line, that we should take the vaccine. Saint Lucia is one of the countries in the Eastern Caribbean where diabetes, which is an underlying condition which COVID affects very much, and we need to take this vaccine, and I would like to place on record that I will take the vaccine as soon as possible, because I want to be an example to my people and to urge my people that we should take the vaccine. I think the vaccine...
Senator, again, it should be relevant to the motion at hand, unless you have asked for leave to make a few statements, a few remarks outside of the motion.
Thank you very much.
To which I will grant you leave.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I wish to concur with you, and I would love that you, I would like to beg leave of you just to speak.
Leave is granted.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I would like to reiterate that I would like to place on the record that, and I'm urging St. Lucians, particularly my colleague taxi drivers all over St. Lucia, we interface with visitors on a daily basis, and I think it is important that we arm ourselves and we should take this vaccine, because it is one of the areas where we will protect ourselves and our family. Madam President, I wish to echo my sentiment again and my support for this resolution, that this loan of 7.78 million US dollars, which will be used for the benefit, more specifically for the people of Viewfort South, Viewfort North, and Library. I wish to record my support. Thank you, Madam President.
Leader of Opposition, Business.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, if you see a smile on my face, it's not because I'm so thrilled about the current motion before us, but that sometimes in this honorable House, we must appreciate the contributions and even the manner in which they're made by our colleagues. And I was very hearty and engaging presentation. Madam President, I stand here in the wake of my former colleague's presentation, in no way, and I want that to be very, very clearly stated, in no way to oppose to this resolution or this motion, while it is still borrowing 19.6 million EC dollars, and I noted my colleague stuck to the US, which seems to have been a habit. And perhaps his background with the taxi might be the case, but he still knows the value in EC dollars. So I'll stick to the EC. 19.6 billion EC to be borrowed from the Caribbean Development Bank for the purpose of financing the water redevelopment program in Viewfort South. Being a Southerner myself, Madam President, any initiative that is going to improve the lives of people in the South will excite me. I would be grateful and welcome an initiative like that. And so I have no reservations but to indicate that this initiative is in no way anything but a good one. But you see, Madam President, there is an old saying, Haïtien dit dans blanc. Sometimes we have to give credit where it's due. And one of the things I've noticed is that there are some initiatives that this government undertakes, and in some cases there is very little acknowledgement of the origin of the initiative or the value of the initiative outside of the government itself. And I was very pleased when I heard my colleague made reference to 2015 when that project was conceived, and he mentioned that it was done under the government then of the Saint Lucia Labour Party, of which I am a member. And Madam President, I think it is also fair to say that at that time, that project was signed off, and even the sword turning ceremony had been held. I commend the government, I'm not afraid to say that, Madam President, for continuing with a project like this one, like was done with the Dennery Redevelopment Project. But Madam President, my problem or my concern is, if water is life, as was correctly stated by my colleague, water is life today in 2021, and water was life then in 2015. And for the last 5 years, Madam President, water has been life. So I want to know, what is it that prevented the government of the day to have continued with that project upon assuming office in 2016? Madam President, this is the essence of my contribution this afternoon. I believe a water redevelopment project in the south of the island will address every one of the concerns that was highlighted by colleague Senator Jean-Pierre. Absolutely. I believe that this project, having been, the loan was secured, everything was in place, all the government had to do was to come in and continue. But I want someone to explain to me, hopefully from this side of the House, what was the reason why we have to be coming in 2021, in February, on the eve of a general election, to beat our chest about a project that the previous government had basically signed off on and was ready to go, financing and everything. I have not heard an explanation or a reason, a plausible one, for that strange or unusual delay of 5 years. I believe all the sectors that were referred to by my colleague senator required that assistance. They could have benefited from that project already. The people of the South that he so, he speaks of, that I also speak of, needed that service. And to come to the Honorable House now to talk about that initiative as if it's something that is coming from a government that is caring and compassionate begs the question, what was wrong with having that project undertaken since the government assumed office 5 years ago? So, Madam President, I await a reason. Now, I noticed that we have, I am from the South and the Honorable Member is from the South, but I know that we'll all agree that there are more members of this Honorable House who have a keen interest in the South. And one of them, Honorable Francis, declared in this Honorable House that he is the endorsed candidate. So perhaps, he can enlighten us a little bit more on why this project is coming in now. But Madam President, I'll leave that for him to do. I know he'll be able and willing to do so. So Madam President, why is it that this took 5 years? That is my essential question. I also made one observation that was brought up by the leader of government business when she was giving a description of the terms of the loan. And one of those is a commitment fee of 1% that, in my view, may actually increase the cost. While the deal is a good one, that commitment fee was not really highlighted, but I think it can actually lead to an increase in the overall cost of financing that loan. And Madam President, another thing that I observe, and that has been mentioned before, is that these loans that we are taking, while this one was already signed off on, but I'm just speaking generally in terms of loans, we tend to say that, it's a good deal, and we're getting great interest rates and repayment terms, and it's like a bargain that we should not let go. Madam President, again, I want to remind this Honorable House, and it has been said so today before me, that not because you can, that you must. In the case of this loan, I would say it's an exception because it was already on the books. It was just a matter of implementation that I think took 5 years too long. But let's be reminded, honorable members, that just because there is a good deal on a loan or on an opportunity doesn't mean that we should just do it and go for it because the deal is good. So I did indicate, Madam President, that my essential concern was not the issue of water redevelopment in the South. That would be cynical, if I would say so. I welcome any development that is in the interest of the people of the South. But I believe 5 years, way too late. 5 years ago, you got into government, everything was on the table. Tell the people why it took you so long to continue with the project and to come back now and make it sound as if you're a hero and you're championing something that the Labour Party, the previous government, had already done all the work and put in place. When I get that explanation, Madam President, I would have no other issues with that specific motion. Thank you, Madam President.
Can I ask whether any other senator will speak apart from the Minister Francis? Because we have a time. No, only because we need to leave here by 6. No, I just wanted anybody else. Okay. Honorable Minister for Home Affairs, Justice and National Security.
Good afternoon again, Madam President. For this resolution before the House, I was tempted to speak earlier, but when I noticed my fellow Senator Jean-Pierre rose to speak, I felt that he was going to be eloquent enough to speak on my behalf before South. But having heard the leader of opposition business, I need to make some sort of clarification. Honorable Jean-Pierre indicated that this project started under the Saint Lucia Labour Party. But I have a memo here from the Ministry of Finance, Economic Growth, Job Creation, External Affairs, and Public Service is there. And I would like to read, Madam President. Background. By letter dated January 25th, 2011, the government of Saint Lucia requested assistance from the CDB to finance the redevelopment of the Viewfort water supply system. On July 6, 2015, the government of Saint Lucia and the CDB signed loan agreement number 33 SFR-OR-STL to commence the 6th Viewfort water supply redevelopment project, estimated at $19,675,000, which comprised a mix of the bank's special fund resources, ordinary capital resources, and the bank's equity market resources made available through the European Investment Bank, EIB, Climate Action Line of Credit, CALC. Madam President, we need to remember our history. The elections of 2011 was held in November of 2011. So on correction, it is the United Workers' Party, under the stewardship of the Honorable Prime Minister Stephenson King, who signed this loan. I hope I gave you through you, Madam President, I hope I did give him the explanation that he was looking for. But you see, sometimes we as senators on the ruling side, we want to give you some kudos, and we look for excuses to give you. But sometimes we make mistakes, and a mistake was made there. And so for you to rattle on and to blame this government for spending 4 years and then beating the chest, we have shown as this government that we continue projects, like the water development project in Dennery. We continued. But there you had an opportunity from 2016, 15, you did nothing. You didn't do anything. Okay, and it took us when we came back to do it. So I just wanted this clarification so that the leader of opposition business understands that this project started under the United Workers' Party. Thank you very much.
Senators, the question is that Parliament authorize the Minister of Finance to borrow from the Caribbean Development Bank an additional amount from its ordinary capital resources not exceeding $7,378,000 US, which consists of an amount of $4,178,000 US from the Equity and Market Resources of the Caribbean Development Bank, additional E&M tranche, and an amount of $3,200,000 US allocated from the European Investment Bank to the Caribbean Development Bank under the Climate Change Action Line of Credit, additional EIB CALC tranche, to assist in financing the 6th Water Viewfort Water Supply Redevelopment Project. Be it further resolved that A, the interest payable on the ordinary capital resources portion withdrawn and outstanding from time to time is 1. In the case of the European Investment Bank, Climate Change Action Line of Credit tranche, 2% per annum. 2. In the case of the Equity and Market tranche, 3.75 per annum. C. The commitment charge is paid at the rate of 1% per annum on the amount of the ordinary capital resources portion unwithdrawn from time to time which accrues. 1. In the case of the loan agreement, from the 60th day after the date of the loan agreement, and 2. In the case of the amended loan agreement, from the 60th day after the date of the amended loan agreement. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, before we take leave of this Senate, if I may just crave your indulgence for us to stand for a moment of silence for the lives that have been lost due to COVID-19. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned, signed and aye.
Senators, the question is that this House do stand adjourned, sine die. And I'll put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Sitting adjourned.